When I was cleaning out my mother's kitchen 6 weeks after her death from pancreatic cancer, looking through her collection of well-worn cookbooks and handwritten recipe cards to decide which ones to keep and which to donate, I found her favorite recipe book, the thick, stained notebook where she'd collected family recipes, cooking tips, and meal plans for over 30 years. As I flipped through pages filled with her familiar handwriting, noting ingredients for Sunday dinners and holiday celebrations that had defined my childhood, I reached the final page and found something that made my hands shake. A letter addressed to me in my mother's careful script, dated 3 months before her diagnosis, beginning with the words, "My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone and you're going through my things, trying to decide what to keep and what to let go. I need you to know that I've been preparing for this moment longer than you realize, and there are things about our family that I need to tell you now that I couldn't say while I was alive. My name is Emma, and this is the story of how discovering my mother's goodbye letter, hidden in her recipe book, revealed that she'd been keeping a family secret for my entire life, and that the recipes she'd lovingly prepared for our family gatherings had been more than just food. They'd been her way of preserving the memory of relatives I'd never known existed. Growing up, I'd always wondered why Mom seemed to have no family beyond us. She never talked about her parents, siblings, or extended family, deflecting questions with vague explanations about being estranged from relatives or having lost touch with family members over the years. When I'd pressed for more details as a teenager, she'd always changed the subject or said that some stories were too painful to share. "Emma, what matters is the family we've created together," Mom would say when I'd ask about grandparents I'd never met or aunts and uncles who existed only in my imagination. Some people are blessed with large families, and others build their own family from the people who choose to love them. I'd accepted her explanations because Mom had always been such a loving, devoted parent that the absence of extended family hadn't felt like a loss. Our holiday celebrations were intimate but warm. Our traditions were meaningful even if they seemed to come from nowhere, and our small family unit had felt complete and happy. But the letter hidden in her recipe book suggested that Mom's family history was far more complex and tragic than she'd ever revealed, and that many of the recipes I'd grown up loving had come from relatives whose existence had been carefully hidden from me for reasons I was about to discover. "The woman who raised you wasn't born Linda Parker," the letter continued. "I was born Maria Elena Rodriguez, and I came to this country when I was 16 years old to escape a family situation that would have destroyed my life if I'd stayed. Everything I've cooked for you, every tradition I've shared, every story I've told about old family recipes, it's all connected to the family I left behind in Mexico, and the life I've never been able to tell you about." As I sat in Mom's empty kitchen, holding her confession and surrounded by the smells and memories of countless family meals, I realized that the woman who had raised me with such love and devotion had been living with a secret that was about to redefine everything I thought I knew about my identity, my heritage, and the recipes that had shaped my childhood. The goodbye letter would reveal why Mom had never returned to Mexico, why she'd changed her name and created a new identity, and why the cooking traditions that had filled our home with warmth and love were actually the only connection she'd maintained to a family she'd been forced to abandon. Part 2. The Secret Identity Revealed. My mother's letter continued with details that would completely transform my understanding of her life and our family history. "Emma, I was born in a small village outside Guadalajara to parents who loved me but lived in poverty that made survival difficult," the letter explained. "When I was 15, my parents arranged for me to marry a man 30 years older who could provide financial stability for our family. I knew that if I stayed, I would spend my life trapped in a marriage with someone I didn't love, probably dying young from the hardships that had claimed so many women in our village. Mother had escaped to the United States with help from a church group that assisted young women fleeing dangerous family situations, but the escape had required her to leave behind everyone and everything she'd ever known. I crossed the border with nothing but the clothes I was wearing and a few recipes my grandmother had taught me," the letter continued. "I changed my name from Maria Elena Rodriguez to Linda Parker, learned English as quickly as I could, and created an entirely new identity so that I could never be found by the family that would have forced me to return to an unwanted marriage." The letter revealed that Mom had worked multiple jobs while finishing high school, then put herself through college and built the successful career in accounting that had provided the stable, comfortable life I'd grown up with. Every recipe in this book represents a piece of the family I left behind, Mom wrote. Your abuela's tamales, your tia Rosa's mole, your bisabuela's flan. I kept these traditions alive in our kitchen because they were the only way I could stay connected to my heritage while keeping you safe from the complications of my past. I learned that Mom had been sending money to her family in Mexico for over 30 years, supporting parents who had never stopped hoping she would return, siblings who had married and had children I'd never known existed, and extended family members who had kept her memory alive despite her absence. You have grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins who have been loving you from a distance your entire life, the letter explained. I have boxes of letters and photographs from Mexico that show the family you've never met but who have been following your achievements and celebrating your milestones. Through the updates I've sent them over the years, the most emotional revelation was that Mom had been planning to tell me the truth about our family for years, but had been afraid that learning about my Mexican heritage would make me feel deceived or would complicate the life she'd worked so hard to build for us. I was terrified that if you knew the truth about my past, you might resent me for keeping you from your extended family, Mom wrote. But I was also terrified that if my family in Mexico knew where I lived, word might get back to the man I was supposed to marry, or to relatives who might try to pressure me to return. The letter included detailed information about our family in Mexico, names, relationships, and contact information for relatives who had been waiting decades for permission to connect with the daughter and granddaughter they'd never been allowed to meet. Your grandfather Miguel is still alive and asks about you in every letter, Mom wrote. Your Aunt Rosa has 3 children who are your age and who have grown up hearing stories about their cousin Emma who lives in America. Your grandmother Carmen died 5 years ago, but not before making me promise that I would find a way to tell you about your Mexican family before it was too late. As I read about relatives I'd never known existed, I began to understand that the recipes in Mom's book weren't just cooking. Instructions, they were love, letters from a family that had been separated by distance and circumstances, but had never stopped caring about each other. The letter continued with revelations that helped me understand how deeply my Mexican heritage had been woven into my daily life without my knowledge, and how my mother had been preserving our family's culture while protecting me from its complications. Emma, every tradition I shared with you came from my Mexican family, the letter explained. The way I taught you to make tortillas by feel rather than measurement, that came from your bisabuela who never learned to read but could cook anything. The songs I hummed while preparing meals, those were lullabies my mother sang to me as a child in Guadalajara. I realized that what I thought were Mom's personal quirks and preferences had actually been cultural traditions she'd been maintaining in secret. Her insistence on always having fresh flowers in the house, her practice of cooking elaborate meals for any celebration, her habit of praying quietly in Spanish when she thought I wasn't listening, all of it had been her way of staying connected to her Mexican roots. The altar I kept in my bedroom that you thought was just decoration. That was an ofrenda honoring family members who have died, Mom wrote. The candles I lit every November, the special foods I prepared that I said were just something I enjoyed making. I was observing Dia de los Muertos, keeping alive the memory of relatives you didn't know existed. The letter included explanations for dozens of childhood memories that suddenly made sense in the context of our Mexican heritage. The reason Mom had always insisted on making breakfast from scratch, the particular way she arranged food on plates, her preference for certain colors and flowers. All of these had been cultural practices she'd been unable to abandon, despite creating a new American identity. Taught you Spanish words without telling you they were Spanish, Mom continued. When I called you mija or said si se puede when you were discouraged, I was speaking the language of our family. When I made café de olla on special mornings or insisted on certain ingredients being prepared in specific ways, I was following traditions, passed down through generations of Rodriguez women. The most profound discovery was a collection of photographs that Mom had been receiving from Mexico throughout my childhood. Pictures of family celebrations, quinceañeras, weddings, and graduations that had happened while we were building our life in America. Look in the box marked Important Documents in my bedroom closet, the letter instructed. You'll find 30 years of photographs showing the family that has been celebrating your milestones from across the border. Your quinceañera that we never had was celebrated by your cousins in Mexico. Your high school graduation was honored with a mass at the church where I was baptized. Your college acceptance was announced to the entire village as if you were their own daughter. Learned that Mom had been bilingual throughout my childhood, but had spoken English exclusively in our home to help me assimilate into American culture without the burden of feeling different or foreign. Wanted you to have all the opportunities that come with being American, Mom wrote. But I also wanted you to carry the strength, values, and love that come from being Rodriguez. Every recipe I taught you carries the DNA of women who survived poverty, revolution, immigration, and loss while never losing their capacity to nurture their families. The letter revealed that several of my personality traits, preferences, and talents that had seemed to come from nowhere were actually inherited characteristics that were common in our Mexican family. Your love of music, your ability to comfort people through cooking, your instinct to gather people around food when they're celebrating or grieving, these are Rodriguez women, traditions that you've been expressing without knowing their origin. Mom had also been preparing for the possibility that I might want to connect with our Mexican family someday, learning about visa requirements, researching travel options, and maintaining relationships that could help me navigate a reunion if I chose to pursue one. I never knew if you'd want to meet your Mexican family, the letter concluded this section, but I wanted to make sure the door remained open in case you ever felt ready to claim that part of your heritage. Part 4, The Choice to Connect. Final pages of my mother's letter provided practical guidance for connecting with our Mexican family, along with her hopes and fears about what that reunion might mean for the life she'd built for us in America. Emma, if you decide you want to meet your Mexican family, I've prepared everything you need to make that connection safely and meaningfully, Mom wrote. In the safety deposit box at First National Bank, you'll find your Mexican birth documents, genealogy charts showing how everyone is related, and current contact information for relatives who have been waiting decades to meet you. The letter included detailed descriptions of family members I'd never known existed, their personalities, occupations, and the role they'd played in Mom's life before she'd immigrated to America. Your grandfather Miguel is now 78 and still works as a carpenter, just as his father did, Mom wrote. He's gentle, funny, and has been sending you birthday money every year that I've been saving in a special account for you. Your Aunt Rosa is a teacher who has 3 children, Carlos, who's studying engineering, Luz, who wants to be a doctor, and little Miguel, who's only 12 but already shows your same talent for cooking. Mom had been corresponding with our family in Mexico through letters written in Spanish that had kept them updated on my achievements, personality, and the woman I was becoming despite the distance between us. They know about your college degree, your job, your interests, and your dreams, the letter explained. I've sent photographs from every important moment in your life, your graduation, your birthday celebrations, even casual photos of you cooking or laughing with friends. You're not a stranger to them, Emma. You're the beloved daughter and granddaughter they've been hoping to meet for 30 years. The letter also addressed my mother's fears about what connecting with our Mexican family might reveal about the life I'd been, living without knowledge of my heritage. I'm afraid they'll think I was wrong to keep you from them for so long, Mom wrote. I'm afraid you'll feel angry that I deprived you of relationships with grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins who could have enriched your life. But I'm also afraid that learning about the poverty and struggles our family has faced in Mexico will make you feel guilty about the opportunities you've had in America. Mom had included specific instructions for approaching our family in a way that would honor both the culture I'd never learned and the American identity that had shaped me. If you decide to visit Mexico, bring recipes and photographs from our life here, she suggested. Show them how their traditions survived and evolved in our American kitchen. Let them see how I kept our family's values alive while giving you opportunities that weren't available to previous generations. The letter concluded with the most important guidance Mom could provide about integrating my Mexican heritage with the identity I'd developed as an American woman. You don't have to choose between being Rodriguez and being the woman I raised you to be, Mom wrote. You can be both. You can honor our Mexican family's traditions while living the life you've built here. You can love your grandparents and cousins while being grateful for the education and opportunities that immigration made possible for you. The final paragraph contained Mom's deepest hope for what discovering our family secret might bring to my life. Emma, I kept this secret because I wanted to protect you, but I'm sharing it now because I want you to understand how much you're loved," the letter concluded. "You have a family in Mexico that has been praying for you, celebrating you, and loving you from a distance your entire life. You also have the strength, values, and traditions of Rodriguez women flowing through your blood. Use that heritage to make your life richer, but don't let it make your life more complicated. You are exactly who you're supposed to be." 8 months after discovering my mother's goodbye letter in her recipe book, I was standing in the kitchen of my grandfather Miguel's house in Guadalajara, learning to make tamales with my Aunt Rosa and meeting the extended family that had been loving me from a distance for 32 years. "Mija, you have your mama's hands," Rosa said as she guided me through the process of spreading mesa on corn husks, using techniques that had been passed down through generations of Rodriguez women. Maria Elena always made the most beautiful tamales, even as a young girl. Meeting my Mexican family had been like discovering a missing piece of myself that I didn't know was gone. The physical resemblances were striking. I had my grandfather's eyes, my aunt's smile, and my grandmother's hands. But more importantly, I recognized personality traits, values, and ways of expressing love that I'd inherited without knowing their origin. "Your mama sent us so many pictures and letters about you," Miguel said, showing me boxes of correspondence that documented my entire childhood from my Mexican family's perspective. "We celebrated your graduations, your achievements, your birthdays, always hoping that someday we'd get to celebrate with you in person. Through my Aunt Rosa, who had become a teacher partly because she'd been inspired by my academic success, I learned that my mother's escape from an arranged marriage had affected our entire family in ways I'd never understood. When Maria Elena left, it changed how our family thought about women's education and opportunities," Rosa explained. "Your mama's courage to create a new life inspired me to get my teaching degree, and it inspired other young women in our village to pursue education instead of early marriage. I discovered that my mother had been sending money home for 30 years, funding education for my cousins, medical care for my grandparents, and improvements to the family home that had lifted our entire extended family out of poverty. Your mama never forgot where she came from," Miguel told me. "Even though she couldn't come back, she never stopped taking care of us from America. The integration of my Mexican heritage into my American life had been surprisingly natural. I'd started cooking traditional recipes with new understanding of their cultural significance. I'd begun learning Spanish seriously for the first time, and I'd discovered a love for music and celebrations that felt like coming home to myself. You don't have to choose between being Mexican and being American," my cousin Carlos told me during one of our video calls after I'd returned to the United States. "You can be both. Your mama proved that you can honor your heritage while building a new life." Today, I divide my vacations between visiting family in Mexico and hosting my Mexican cousins when they're able to visit America. My kitchen has become a bridge between two cultures, where traditional Rodriguez family recipes are prepared alongside the American dishes that shaped my childhood. I keep my mother's recipe book open on my counter, not just as a collection of cooking instructions, but as a reminder that love transcends borders, languages, and the complications that force families apart. Every meal I prepare using her recipes connects me to generations of women who survived hardship while never losing their capacity to nurture their families, the goodbye letter my mother hid in her recipe book had given me more than just family history. It had given me a deeper understanding of resilience, sacrifice, and the ways that love persists even across decades of separation. My mother's final gift wasn't just the truth about our Mexican heritage. It was the understanding that families can be separated by circumstances but never truly broken, and that the most important traditions aren't just preserved in recipes, they're preserved in the love that motivates us to feed, protect, and sacrifice for the people who matter most to us. The last page of Mom's recipe book had contained the most important ingredient of all: the truth about where I came from and the love that had been shaping my life from both sides of the border since before I was born.